Each and every one of us has access to a piece of glass. The chances are you're looking at it now or holding it in your hand. Keeping it close. A magic mirror which captures, contains and conveys back to us an endless array of realities. This is the infinite screen.
Hello friends, and welcome to Infinite Screen, the podcast where we talk about, in a world where you could watch absolutely anything on the screen, in your living room, in your pocket, all around you, what would you actually choose to watch? My name is Matthew Hook. I'm a lifelong movie obsessive and also an advisor to lots of different organizations about how they can apply the principles of storytelling to other things that aren't movies and TV.
I'm Phil Kingsland-John. I run a theatre, film and education company. I used to lecture in film studies and I teach young people how to make films.
Awesome. So today we're going to do one of our top 10 episodes. And the idea is pretty simple. Each week we're going to choose a different theme. Some of them could be quite random. It could be best sound effects. It could be films set on Mars. It could be all kinds of weird stuff. But what we're going to do is in roughly an hour, we are going to, between us, build a top 10 list. I've picked 5 choices. Phil has picked 5 choices. We haven't compared notes at all, so we have absolutely no idea what's coming at us. Yeah, it could go well, could go, yeah, it could be very random.
It might ruin our friendship.
We're a few decades in now. I think we'll be all right.
Okay, yeah.
So this week's theme. This week's theme is guilty pleasures. So the idea of a guilty pleasure, I guess, is a film that maybe we wouldn't recommend absolutely everyone to watch, but we're looking for things that have given us some genuine joy, things that have stuck with us for some reason. But obviously we're also looking at movies that we know maybe aren't actually very good, or movies that definitely shouldn't work, but somehow they do.
Yes, I think the concept of a guilty pleasure is fascinating. The question of what is it about watching these films that makes us feel guilty or ashamed? I think it's if I might say so about ourselves, Matthew, it's a very brave choice for us to start with, because it could mean that we are undermining our credibility as film critics right from the off.
Instantly in the first episode. Also, I don't know about guilty pleasures. I'm quite in favor of pleasures generally. I don't think I feel guilty about any of my pleasures, but maybe I feel a bit guilty about the idea that some people might go and watch some of these movies and not have the experience that I have had.
Yes, I think it's not so much you feel guilty about watching the film, but you might feel guilty about admitting that you enjoy the film.
Yes. But let's start. Phil, you are up first. What is your first guilty pleasure? And if you wouldn't mind, as we go through, let me know, I guess, what makes you feel guilty about it and what makes it feel pleasurable. So, Phil, where are we going to start?
What I've tried to come back to in selecting my top 5 is those films which I have returned to time and time again over the years. So I guess that is disadvantages any new potential guilty pleasures, but these are the films which, despite being wobbly in some way, shape or form, I have just kept coming back to.
Yeah, absolutely. Without disclosing my list, I think my latest choice, I think, is 1997. So that may be an insight into the world of guilty pleasures. But anyway, Phil, kick us off. Where are we going first?
Okay, so before Denis Villeneuve achieved critical adulation for his recent multi-film mega opus, a young and relatively inexperienced filmmaker by the name of David Lynch created his own adaptation of the first book in Frank Herbert's seminal sci-fi book series, Dune. A bold, bewildering, bonkers attempt to compress all of Herbert's crazy ideas into a single narrative. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, this is a science fiction story set in a far-flung post-AI future where different imperial families vie for control of the desert planet Arrakis, the sole source of the most valuable substance in the universe, the spice melange. And there are sandworms, there are desert-based nomadic freedom fighters, there are space witches, there's the messianic main character destined to redeem the planet. And it's all rather hokey, but deliciously odd, deliciously strange. What brings me pleasure, some of the castings in this film.
Yeah.
It was for David Lynch. It kind of brought together. He was just assembling a cast of people that he liked to work with, and so we see a lot of the same faces that then crop up in Twin Peaks. Not least, of course, Carl MacLachlan as the lead. I mean, arguably, he's kind of miscast here as Paul Atreides, but he's very charming, and he's youthful and beautiful, and he looks great. But I think the main thing that makes this film great and why I've kept coming back to it is, of course, the art direction, the sets, the costumes, the music as well, and just that all-pervading sense of bizarreness and mystery. I also think, actually, that some of the changes that David Lynch made to the story improve it. A few of the changes. There's one thing in particular is they have this idea of the weirding module, which is a weapon that the freedom fighters in the desert use, the Fremen, and it can convert sound into an energy attack. But not all syllables, noises, vocal utterances work in the same way. And so there's this big reveal then that Paul, the main character, who then becomes named Muad'Dib when he becomes the freedom fighter, that his own name is a killing word. And that kind of, I don't know, it just seems thematically like it works with the rest of the story, this idea of voice and utterance being turned into kind of physical manifestation. And then when he kind of reaches his messianic climax in the film, there's this idea that he doesn't need the weirding module anymore. He can just do it with his voice. And it's got this brilliant moment after he's killed Sting, which I will return to on the guilty side of things. After he's killed Sting, he kind of says something, and like there's a crack which goes through the rock of the cavern that they're in or something. So yes, all of these things I love about the film. But of course, we are talking about guilty pleasures.
Yeah, so
And
you've already mentioned Sting, Phil. Let's go a little bit deeper into some of the dark side of this movie.
so this film does feature Sting in kind of silver metallic speedos, in possibly the least pleasurable moment of this guilty pleasure. Of course, Lynch himself hated this film, and he hated the experience of making it. This is actually an Alan Smithy film in some versions. So Alan Smithy was a pseudonym that members of the Directors Guild could use under certain circumstances if they wanted to take their name off the film. It no longer exists, but one version of this film is officially an Alan Smithy film. He hated it. It was the film that convinced him that he has to always maintain Final Cut.
Did he hate the end
Whenever,
product? I know the process was difficult, but did he hate the end product itself?
I think perhaps he couldn't see the end product with any objectivity because it was all wrapped up. And I guess he felt like he had to make so many compromises in making it that, yes, I think he very much did hate the final product. So, what are your opinions of
Well,
June?
yeah, I would say this is not a film I go back to voluntarily. That being said, I have watched it a couple of times. You can see in it what it could have been, definitely. And if
Yeah,
like kind of vaunting ambition, I think is a thing that's going to come back in a couple of my choices, where you have vaunting ambition that doesn't quite land, but you can still get great enjoyment from kind of imagining what it could have been or what it nearly was. And it's interesting you mentioned Twin Peaks. I went back and I'm again watching Twin Peaks from the beginning. And I think this is one I go, I would have been really interested to see the David Lynch June TV program. Like if this had
mhm.
been 6 to 8 kind of 1 hour episodes where you got to stay in the weirdness a bit more comfortably and a bit longer, you can see it would have
Yeah,
been great. I think maybe the idea of taking all this stuff and making it into a movie whilst also adding, because David Lynch can't make something and not add more
right,
weirdness,
yes.
more to. I think the idea that that's ever going to come in a length of time you can actually sit on a chair in a cinema, I think is just unrealistic, probably. But
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that Lynch is or was a brilliant and singular filmmaker, but possibly his crowning achievement was Twin Peaks or parts of Twin Peaks.
Mm.
And yeah, I think you might be right, that kind of
Well,
longer
and I think
form
the best movies
storytelling.
made were very actually very simple stories. So obviously,
Mm.
like Blue Velvet, for example, obviously it's weird, but it's actually as a story, it's quite simple. It's not. It doesn't have all kinds of multiple worlds to travel through, really. But
Yeah, and I guess those films that we remember him for most fondly are also the ones where narratively, like Mulholland Drive, he kind of abandons
yeah,
the necessity for a linear narrative, really.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
it's amazing thinking that before Hollywood made all these massive space epics, that this is kind of where Hollywood started, was with trying to start to make this kind of film with David Lynch. Um,
Yeah, interestingly, Lynch was also targeted by George Lucas to direct Return of the Jedi. Um, so I guess he was just at that point. He was part of the scene. He was an up and coming young director that a lot of people had noticed was talented. Um, but yeah, I think there's a great interview with Lynch where he talks at length about this meeting he had with George Lucas, and he went. I think he went to his house and George started talking to me about Wookiees, and I think he mentions that he has a start of a headache, and then they go to a restaurant and all it serves is salad, and George keeps talking to him about this idea, and his headache's getting worse and worse. And then yeah, he turns down the opportunity to direct Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, I wonder if he saw any of the sequel movies, which I think headache is the best description for those movies. It's like a
Indeed. Right.
love
Okay.
it
Well, that's
film.
my first pin on the board.
Okay, brilliant. There's a small chance that I picked a movie here that is also on your list, but
Okay.
I'm gonna dive in nonetheless, because for my first movie I have chosen 1997's Face Off.
You're not having any fun, are you, Sean? Try terrorism for hire. We'll blow some stuff up. It's more fun.
Delirious madcap action movie directed by John Woo at the peak John Woo, starring Nicolas Cage and John Travolta as enemies who literally swap each other's faces to hunt each other down, which means that you have moments where you have Nicolas Cage pretending to be John Travolta, pretending to be Nicolas Cage. It's quite insane. It is totally bonkers and ridiculous. Obviously, the premise is ridiculous. Some of the action sequences are absolutely insane. It being a John Woo movie, he has this obsession with making birds appear in all kinds of places where birds couldn't possibly be, but it means you have these beautifully stylized someone walking along shooting machine gun with doves flying around next to them. So yeah, it's totally mad, and I think by any objective standard of plotting or balance or sanity, it is quite obviously a bad movie, but it is unbelievably enjoyable. It is some of the action moments are insanely highly blown, just to the greatest extreme. Brilliant action sequences, and crucially, one of the definitive Nicolas Cage performances. If you don't want to watch the film, go and watch the YouTube compilation someone has made of all the craziest Nicolas Cage moments in this movie and watch them all back to back. Is genuinely hilarious.
Nice. The
And
Nicolas
yet, weirdly,
Cage
in the context of
supercut.
the film, it all makes sense. Like in the kind of the high drama, the high melodrama of the film, each of those moments on its own feels like a natural part of the flow. But then when you watch them on their own, you're like, that's objectively totally insane. So was it a pleasure? It's a pleasure, in the way there's a kind of platonic ideal of an action movie, I guess, where everything is just dialed up to 160% all the time, musically, visually, explosion levels, slow motion, speed up, everything. And if you, this is like just the most extreme version of that, to a point where sense almost seems to be dissolving. But that kinetic joy of action movies, you definitely get in its purest form in the peaks of Face Off, and it's bananas.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, interesting choice. Interesting choice. I'm not the biggest fan of Face Off, I must
Oh, okay.
confess. I am a big fan of action cinema and martial arts cinema. I really liked, weirdly enough, Hard Target, which I think was John Woo's first English language movie, I think, with Jean-Claude Van Damme, which, yes, it's just full of bonkers, brilliantly bonkers moments and action sequences, including him punching a snake, kicking a can of gasoline into somebody's face and shooting it in midair. Yeah, all of that stuff. I think what Face Off suffers from is the fact that Nicolas Cage and John Travolta, neither of them can really move in a graceful,
Okay.
balletic way. Whereas with Jean-Claude Van Damme, with Chow Yun-Fat, of course, like the of who I mentioned because he was so kind of important in establishing John Woo's career, really, out of the Hong Kong films that they made together. There's there's someone, a star, who can kind of pull off perhaps those moves, and even like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible 2,
Yeah.
of course, physically incredibly capable. And I think maybe that's why I didn't quite connect with Face Off in the same way. I remember when it came out, I was very excited to see it. So I guess it could also be a case of overblown expectations.
Well, I also think of the two, probably. I think for me, Nicolas Cage is irreplaceable in the film because it is the madness, the pure madness of Nicolas Cage that makes the film a pleasure for me. I will just go back and I want to spend time with that Nicolas Cage. I'm not sure John Travolta makes me feel the same way. I think they probably caught Travolta slightly too late to play that role. They needed a slightly sleeker, slightly faster version of Travolta. Yeah, probably. There's some good alternative castings for this
Yeah,
one.
maybe.
Can I give you the
Oh,
alternative
yeah,
castings that were considered? And
sure.
yeah, which would you have chosen? So uh, Bruce Willis and Alec Baldwin was considered,
Okay.
which probably seemed less insane at the time than it does now. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would have liked to see
I could I,
yeah,
I could see that working, definitely.
I would have liked to see a nasty Bruce Willis. I think there aren't enough
Mm.
nasty Bruce Willis films. I think he could have done that. This one definitely would have been bad. Uh, Michael Douglas and Harrison Ford.
Oh my goodness.
That's just very difficult to get your head around it. Apparently, that one quite nearly happened. So yeah,
Can you imagine? That would be so weird.
I love Harrison Ford, but showing two sides of his personality in one film, I think is probably beyond him. The final one. This is obvious once you think about it. Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Slightly difficult from a build
That
perspective to pull that one off, I think.
yeah, absolutely. That would have been brilliant, though. That would have been like the ultimate, I don't know, 80s action homage.
Yes, but it was 1997, so again, I think they might have missed the boat slightly for. But I think it was
Yes,
more
yeah,
developed
yeah,
that era. Originally, it was going to be a sci-fi movie. Apparently, that was the original idea for it. Was going to be set in some kind of dystopian future.
yeah. Okay, it feels quite sci-fi anyway to
It's
me.
definitely
I
sci-fi
guess,
styling, isn't it? Yeah, and it has
yeah,
mad science in it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, Face Off. What do you
Okay,
think, Phil?
face
What do you
off.
think? Where's it go? You don't like Face Off, but I don't think you can mark films down because you don't like them. It's guilty pleasure. But
Um, no, that means that I approve of the guilt in admitting that you like it. I think are we ranking these things on how good they are as films, or are we ranking them on that some kind of imagined ratio between quality and embarrassment
I
factor?
think it has to be the imagined ratio.
I think that Face Off is more or less critically maligned than Dune.
I think
I
you're right.
think
Yeah,
that Dune is guiltier.
I think you're right. I think you're right. I can take that.
Okay.
So we have currently out of two. We have June at number 1, Face Off at number 2. Okay, Phil, lay another guilty pleasure on me.
My second choice is a film called Gandahar from 1987.
Message prioritaire, message prioritaire.
Servant Sylvain, le Conseil féminin t'a choisi pour une mission capitale, difficile et dangereuse.
This is an animated science fiction film, French. It was directed by somebody called René Laloux. And René Laloux is an interesting figure in the world of animation because he wasn't really an artist himself, not a drawer or a draftsman himself. But he was very good at pulling together some really kind of talented people and making some very curious and charming films. So he worked with some very seminal French illustrators, the most famous of which is probably Moebius, aka Jean Giraud, who achieved more widestream recognition through his work on Alien and Fifth Element, amongst others. But in this case, he pulled in Philippe Cazat. Philippe Cazat was a famous artist from his work on Métal Hurlant, which was the French anthology sci-fi and fantasy magazine comic book, which then became rebranded as Heavy Metal in the States. And there's a heavy metal movie which took some of the stories. And there's a short-lived TV series called Métal Hurlant. But more importantly, perhaps the impact of all of that world was on Ridley Scott and Alien and Blade Runner specifically. He drew a lot of inspiration. But back to Gandahar. I love this film because Philip Cazat created with his designs just a mad, strange, fascinating world. It's intoxicating, the strangeness of it. It's got a cool time loop story with these mechanical marauders sent back in time to eliminate all organic matter and replace it with machinery. But for the guilt, it has the tone is odd. Tonally, it's kind of weird and inconsistent, overly sentimental, overly pretentious, perhaps in that kind of navel-gazing French way that happens. Some of the action is not perhaps particularly well animated. It lacks impact. But I think the main problem with this is the sexual politics and kind of how dated all of that feels. And there's a character called Ambisextra, who is this statuesque, bald-headed but with wings coming out of her head, and she's got a mighty cleavage, and she kind of is the matriarchal figure of this society. So yes, it's got some very kind of dubious elements to it. But I guess for me, I loved those comic books growing up. I loved kind of the detail that was invested in these worlds. And for that reason, I have chosen it as my second choice.
Intriguing. Would you recommend it with confidence to which kind of people would enjoy it, do you think? Because I'm guessing it's probably not for everybody.
Yes, I did. We were doing a lockdown film club, just a bunch of mates and myself, and I did recommend it. And I remember one person particularly absolutely slating it afterwards. I think, yes, it definitely is not for everybody. I think maybe fans of more kind of genre stuff, fans of French, the bande dessinée is the French word for comic books, fans of that sort of graphic storytelling for sure, but maybe no one else.
There was a couple of moments in that clip you showed that reminded me a little bit of Rick and Morty, but I think probably tonally is the opposite.
Yeah, it takes itself very seriously, weirdly enough. But yeah, I can see Rick and Morty doing a good pastiche of it. And of course, it's also perhaps worth noting that Heavy Metal, the cartoon of the comic books that are tangential to this, was parodied brilliantly in the episode Major Boobage of South Park.
Okay. But where does it rank? We got this is confusing.
It's obsession with rankings.
Yeah, that's the format. Man. That's the format.
I don't know, maybe put it bottom so far.
I think. I mean, I appreciate that it's given you a lot of pleasure, Phil, but I suspect it's going to be hit and miss on the pleasure front.
It's niche. It's
Yeah,
definitely niche. Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Give me your next pick.
Okay. So this is my furthest escape from the kingdom of the 80s and the 90s, which I found very difficult to escape from generally. But what it shared with some of those movies is that this is a movie that gives me a great sense of nostalgia. Because I'm a big fan of the old Hollywood movies. I spent a lot of time watching them with my parents when I was growing up, and this is like the biggest swing and miss, and potentially the final death knell of the old Hollywood. And this is the 1963 movie Cleopatra. Have you ever seen Cleopatra, Phil?
It's one of my mum's favorite films.
Okay.
But having said that, I don't think I've sat through the whole thing. I've seen bits of it.
Yeah, so there's a lot of it. It's a vast epic. You can probably guess what the story of it is. It's about Cleopatra, and specifically Cleopatra's relationships first with Julius Caesar, who is played brilliantly by Rex Harrison. That gives you a sense of where we are in the timeline. This is kind of the end of the old Hollywood, and obviously as Mark Antony, we have Richard Burton, and this is the movie that brought together Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor for one of the most tumultuous romances in the history of celebrity, really, and in some ways, the first modern celebrities, really, Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, living out all of their alcohol-soaked traumas in public over the course of many years. But this is the film that started it all. So yes, 1963's Cleopatra. I'm guessing this is a movie that lots and lots of people have heard of, and not that many people nowadays have watched. But if you were around in 1963, I think it was very much the biggest thing, the biggest pop culture event of its time, at a time where, really for a couple of decades, these kind of big Roman historical epics had been the most bankable genre there was. And this was the big swing to go, this is going to be the biggest one of them all. It's going to have the most spectacular scenes. It's going to have the greatest, most compelling actors. And it was the most expensive movie, I believe, at the time that had ever been made. It's a total, horrendous, messy failure. And in fact has been credited by some as being the end of the old Hollywood. It's nearly bankrupted the studio, basically put people off making these huge star-driven vehicles with thousands and thousands of extras. So it's fair to say it's got a bad press, and there's some good reasons. So I'm going to do the guilty first, Phil. I'm going to do the guilty first, and then I'll explain why it gives me pleasure. It's a total mess because originally the idea was that it would be two different films. So one that was about Julius Caesar and one that was about Mark Antony, which obviously that's the approach that Shakespeare took to the same material. And it was envisaged as a kind of very dense character study of the triangle of these three people, and was full of rich dialogue and psychological examination. But they ended up taking almost all of that stuff out because they realized the film was much too long. But the thing they would not give up on were the absolutely insane set pieces, like these big theatrical moments. The most famous one is Cleopatra coming into Rome to see Julius Caesar for the first time, which is, it's just about 10 to 15 minutes of outrageous excess, scenes with tens of thousands of extras in them. So the end result is the film is a total mess. It was supposed to be a brilliant character exploration Instead, all three characters are kind of done dirty by the film. You don't really get to know any of them. Particularly,
Right.
Cleopatra comes across in this really strange way, as just kind of a very grumpy person. But I suspect that's because large bits of the script were removed. So it's a terrible mess. It is the most outrageously absurd and extravagant movie. But if you were looking for, this is what gives me pleasure. There was a time where the idea of what a spectacular movie was so physically ambitious, like in terms of the sets you would build, the tableaus you would create, and just this sheer wave. Imagine filming scenes. It obviously will never happen again in the history of mankind. Scenes where there are tens of thousands of physical extras in full Roman regalia swarming the streets. And it's just on an unbelievably vast scale, and has as a result just a tone which is incredibly ambitious and incredibly grand. And so this is why for me a guilty pleasure. I think I probably watch scenes from this movie more than I watch the movie, but it's like a thing to tap into, that pure human melodrama on the most spectacular scale. So that's why it's a guilty pleasure for me. It's just a thing I want to tap into, that sense of grandness and ambition.
The main things that I know about Cleopatra are, one, yes, it was the most expensive flop of all time at the time, and two, that they let the Carry On team use the same sets for making Carry On Cleo.
yes, absolutely. Which is that actually came quite close to being on my list. I considered this being a double header. I think the other thing it's got is I love, with the kind of historical mindset, I love the kind of intersection. This movie comes at exactly the intersection between the tradition and the modern. Like 1963, it's actually later than you would think this film would be, because really it feels more like the movies of the 50s, where they were making.
Yeah, so that you mentioned that kind of that genre of swords and sandals, I suppose. What you said, it was at its kind of peak. Was that like the trend that got started by, I don't know, like Ben-Hur and things?
Yeah,
or
Ben-Hur. You get some of the big biblical ones, like The Greatest Story Ever Told. They're all very, very reverential to their subject matter, very, very grand. I guess, Spartacus is in the same kind of mode, but that's obviously that's a slightly different kind of movie. But at the same time, it's also the place where Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton meet, which feels like much more like that kind of late 60s, 70s celebrity culture, a story that was still running into the 80s, really. So it's like this weird intersection between that very, very old tradition and then very modern, and then you've got Rex Harrison, who's in the middle of it, who I think is probably the best thing in the movie in reality. But he's just, he's surrounded by these other two leads who are almost part of a totally different world to the world that he's part of. But it kind of makes sense in the film as well. It's the other thing that I like about it, that as a triangle, they're a good triangle. Yeah, Elizabeth Taylor gets some stick for this movie, but I think she's actually very good. I think she's been done dirty by the production progress. And it's actually quite an interesting backstory if you want to dig into it. The guy, I think his name is Mankiewicz. There's a few Mankiewiczes who have various big Hollywood careers, but he was brought in as the second writer and director, and it was his vision to have these two movies. And effectively, he had a total breakdown in the process of making this movie. A total health collapse, just trying to keep this thing on the rails.
And it makes more sense in a way, like putting all of that money into building sets and stuff if it's for more than one film.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as the kids would say, I'm vibing with your choice there. Yeah. Where would you put it? Where would you rank it?
Well, funny enough, I think I would probably put this above Face Off. I think it sits beneath Dune, but I think it's interesting. I think they're quite similar.
I think so. I think we've chosen them for
movies. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm happy with that.
Okay. Right. You're up, Phil. What's next?
Okay, so this is probably the film I do feel guiltiest about admitting to you that I like.
Intriguing.
1973's Jesus Christ Superstar. This film.
This is going to be a hard sell. Okay.
So crucially, this film was not made by a Christian. I think that's important. So it was made by director Norman Jewison, who brilliant filmmaker known for things such as In the Heat of the Night and Fiddler on the Roof. Yeah, he creates this adaptation of the stage show and concept album, which is all shot on location in the Holy Land. The film frames the story by showing a bunch of hippies turning up on a tour bus in the middle of some ruins in the desert, and it's kind of done as if they are putting on putting on a version. So it's all kind of contemporary styling set in the 70s with 70s costumes and props and things. It's a rock opera. So there's no spoken dialogue, all sung. The film reimagines the final days of Jesus through the eyes of Judas, rendered in a raw-ish contemporary 70s rock and funk infused style. So in terms of the pleasure, I think first and foremost, the performances from Jesus and Judas. So that's Ted Neely as Jesus and Carl Anderson as Judas are fantastic. They played the roles for over 40 years. Like Ted Neely had a farewell tour in 2014. I mean, there's a reason for that. It's because these performances are so good. The photography is fantastic. Like the settings are wonderful. And like, obviously it's a very subjective thing, but I kind of like the music. It's surprisingly funky. And I guess it's it's Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote the music. Tim Rice wrote the lyrics. It's like one of their earliest collaborations, and there's still it's before Andrew Lloyd Webber became Andrew Lloyd Webber in terms of those perhaps more cliched stylings that so much of his work then falls into. And I think there's a roughness around it. There's an energy to it there, which I really like. And from my personal point of view, it was a bit of a family ritual watching this kind of around Easter time pretty much every year. So I guess I have for that reason, a nostalgic attachment to it. I mean, in terms of the guilt, well, the music, like I do love it, but as I say, I feel guilty admitting that I love it. There's like a cringy public school boys discover funk thing going on in some ways. And the 70s style in general can be a little bit cringy at times with, I think the guy playing Peter has a terrible white boy afro. And I guess a film outside of religious circles about Jesus is always going to be a bit of a hard sell. But nonetheless, if I'm being honest, it's a film that I've returned to a lot of times, and I do love it. So there you go, Jesus Christ Superstar.
How many times have you watched this film, Phil? I was saving this question for the most embarrassing moment, and I think this is one.
Yeah, I'd say countless. Yeah, I don't know. I've lost.
It's impossible to count how many times you've watched it.
It's impossible. Yes, it's a number that only exists in the mind of God.
So we're talking definitely double figures, are we?
Definitely double figures. Yeah. I'd say probably less than that. How old am I? Yeah, I'd say maybe 20 times, 10 to 20.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, maybe.
Is it your favorite movie of all time?
No, it's not.
Sounds a bit like it might be.
Listen, I'm laying my soul bare to you here, Matthew. Yeah.
I'm taking advantage. Is it? You describe it as like a movie about Jesus from outside does it have a religious element to it? It seems strange.
Well, I mean, it is the passion story, but it stops before the resurrection.
Okay.
And Judas is kind of the main character-ish. He sees Jesus' message as getting muddied, and yeah, so he's it's very understandable why he does what he does in it, and then why he feels so guilty afterwards, because he never intended Jesus to suffer in that way.
Mm.
And then his final show-stopping number, of course, is him descending from the heavens as an angel to sing the title track, Jesus Christ Superstar.
Okay. I'm going to give this film a go, Phil, simply because
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to absolutely hate it. So therefore, I feel like I need to put myself to the test. I need to check my assumptions and give it a go. I think the story of Judas is very interesting. There's a few good stories about Judas. Judas is fundamental to God's plan for the Passion. Without him, the story can't be fulfilled. So it's a bit harsh on Judas that he gets.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So where would you slide into? Is it your number one?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. It feels like you've pulled pleasure out of an unexpected place, and I think maybe
Okay.
maybe that is the Platonic standard.
All right. Well, we'll get a chance to revise things later on if we feel it's necessary.
Okay.
What's your next pick?
All right. So this was my last to arrive because I'd totally forgotten this film existed, and then it had to come back. So I think if I'm looking for a genre that is my my guilty pleasure genre, it would be probably the area of dystopian sci-fi, ideally starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then I was trying to get to the bottom of what is the film that has made that true, and that film is definitely 1987 dystopian action film, The Running Man.
In the year 2017, an innocent man accused of a crime has a choice: hard time or prime time.
Sensational. Perfect contestant. I want him.
He must pay or play the running man.
You've seen The Running Man, presumably.
I have, not recently, but I have seen it. Yeah.
So quick recap is loosely, very, very loosely, based on a novel by Stephen King, as so many good but slightly odd movies turn out to be. It is, I guess, it's the precursor to the whole world of the Hunger Games and all these other things that we've become very used to. But the premise is dystopian future where, the populace need to be kept in place by the theatre of cruelty. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a police officer who's refused to fire on a crowd at a public protest, and as a result is sentenced to go and participate in a game called The Running Man, in which he somehow has to get past some really vicious villains to try and complete this celebrity game show. And it's an Arnie movie, so you already know what happens at the end. I don't need to give you any spoilers. Everyone will know what happens. Arnie is, of course, triumphant. But yes, this is definitely one of my most often returned to guilty pleasures.
They remade it recently, didn't they?
They did. I haven't seen the remake. Yes.
Yeah, directed by Edgar Wright, which seems like a very odd fit.
Yeah, and it seems to have come and gone without much of a whimper, doesn't it? Unfortunately.
I mean, I totally understand and appreciate where you're coming from. Yeah, it's cool whilst being so horrifically dated.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll run through. Should we do some of the bad things, or yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So it doesn't really make any sense. And it's a weirdly small world. I don't know if they just spent all the money on Arnie,
the jumpsuit,
and the jumpsuit, but it's like a weirdly small world. So you don't really see much of a lens of the world in which this set. So it does feel at some points a little bit like a game show. It's a bit peculiar, and there's some terrible nonsense in it. I don't know if you remember the villains in The Running Man, but yeah.
No.
So it's kind of, similar to the world, I guess, of WWF wrestling, but they have a series of villains, each of whom has a kind of a gimmick. And I'm going to remind you of these gimmicks. So Sub-Zero, who is an ice hockey assassin, and you have to fight him on an ice hockey court while having like a sharp puck aimed at your head. You have Dynamo, who has two powers. He can generate electricity, but he's also, for no good reason, an opera singer. And is played by an actual classically trained baritone. And then you have Buzzsaw, who just runs around with chainsaws. And this I don't think this was the essence of the Stephen King story on which it was based. a series of terrible, terrible, weird villains. But that is the center of the film. The whole of the middle act is Arnie defeating these three really quite ridiculous characters. And then the other thing is this is 87, so this is really Arnie on the up. But this movie really suffers from the Arnie paradox, which is it wouldn't have got made without him. It wouldn't be an interesting movie without him in it. But because he's in it, it has to be filled with terrible, terrible puns and one-liners all the way through that just shatter the mood. So the mood is like dystopian sci-fi, but obviously every 7 minutes or so, Arnie has to do a funny. So it just
where did that come from? Because like his like really kind of career turning performances such as like Conan and Terminator, he's not like that. But it happens at some point that he has to be like that in everything.
Yeah. So he says, "I'll be back" in this movie, for example, at a time just,
of course,
it's totally unnecessary. He says, "There's some really bad ones. There's like, you were Sub-Zero, now just plain zero," which is like, it's not a pun, it's not a joke, it's just a thing. It just undercuts the line. Can you guess what he said? Someone says to him, "What happened to Buzzsaw?"
He got buzzed.
No, he said he had to split because he's just cut him in half with a chainsaw. And there's a this is one of the final speeches. Well, it's not the final speech, but it's near the end when he's talking to the villain. Shall I do it in an Arnie voice? Shall I give it a go?
Yeah.
"You cold-blooded bastard! I'll tell you what I think of it. I live to see you eat that contract, but I hope you leave enough room for my fist, because I'm going to ram it into your stomach and break your goddamn spine." I hope you leave enough room for my fist, I think is my favorite part of that line. So it's one of those, but it's not just a terrible movie. So there's a couple of things about this that's brilliant. I think firstly, aesthetically, it does something to me. It has that kind of slightly chintzy, glamorous looking 80s thing, which is just, it's always right on the edge, but it's combined with an absolutely brilliant soundtrack. And so it just has that aesthetic. Like if you're imagining that world, 80s dystopian future, like it just crystallizes that brilliant. So as a vibe and an aesthetic, it's always satisfying to drop in on it and just tap into that feeling, which probably for me, it's the first time I discovered those kind of movies, that kind of aesthetic, and The Running Man actually was my entry point. So obviously there's much better movies. You can go back and go to Terminator, and you can go forward and go to Total Recall. And obviously those are both really good movies that do some of the same thing. But this is actually the one that I saw first and the one that I fell in love with. So, I'm sentimental about it. And also it's, I guess it sparked a whole world of stuff to come. Like, I think this execution of that idea didn't quite work, but I think that's then what sparked loads of great sci-fi movies. I think this whole world, which I think is great. I mean, my kids all love The Hunger Games, and really The Hunger Games just is The Running Man. It's the same thing.
I think a lot of kind of, high art meeting trashy schlock often is quite compelling, isn't it? And that is obviously such a on the nose idea, satirically speaking, and but for it to be treated in such a trashy way is there's something quite charming about that.
Yeah, it's both very serious and totally undermines itself all the way through. The best thing about it, actually, which I'd forgotten, is there's a brilliant casting. See, one of our upcoming episodes is about brilliant casting. But they cast as the guy who's like the game show host, the malevolent game show host who's manipulating everything. They cast Richard Dawson, who was at that time a real life quiz show host. He was one of the most famous quiz show hosts in America. And I'd forgotten, went back and looked at it. I'd forgotten how brilliant he is in this movie. And it really does something, really does something great. But yeah.
Would it have been better with Bruce Forsyth?
That would have been the British version. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I've enjoyed your your description of it and your enthusiasm for it, and it has made me want to see it again. I think that goes
Tricky, isn't it?
somewhere around 3 or 4. What have we got in 3 and 4
We've
spots at the
got
moment?
June at 2, Cleopatra at 3, Face Off at 4.
I think maybe between 3 and 4. What do you think?
It's probably more of a genuine pleasure than Cleopatra. I don't know.
Okay.
It's a bit of an easier access guilty pleasure, I would say. I'm going to put it in at number 3.
That's about all we have time for on this episode of The Infinite Screen. Join us next time for the stunning conclusion of our Guilty Pleasures Top 10 list. And in the meantime, please like, share and subscribe. We're just starting out, so any and all help you can give us to spread the word would be much appreciated.